I'm Jackie Berry, and I'm going to talk about what bidirectional biliteracy means for African peoples. So I'm a cognitive scientist. I study human-computer interaction. I am a Fulbright Scholar at the American University in Cairo for the 2019-2020 school year. Obviously, that was cut short a little bit with the coronavirus pandemic. I was asked to come home about 8 weeks early. So I actually had to move the course that I was teaching online, but luckily I was able to have completed most of my research that I was conducting on the subjects there. My current project is called Bidirectional Biliteracy. What does that mean? Well, bidirectional biliteracy refers to being able to speak, read, and write more than one language. And my entire argument is that when you switch between reading and writing in text of different orientations, this can affect certain non-linguistic behavior. Specifically, I study switching between interfaces. Okay, so I'm just going to start with an overview of what the number one growing problem in technology today, and this definitely applies to African people. It used to be a matter of access and I'm sorry, can everyone still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going.
Jackie, I think since I don't know who's who's running this, but you can just mute whoever had their sound on.
Yes, I tried to do that, but it didn't work.
So, oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just keep going, and
Rebecca has a.
Okay. All right. I'll keep going. So access and infrastructure are becoming less of an issue on the African continent because there are approximately 500,000 cell phone towers there now. So the real problem is that every device has a different interface. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is when you write an email or send a message or make a phone call or even withdraw money from a bank machine, you're dealing with a different interface every single time. This problem didn't exist 10 years ago when we weren't using technology for literally every single personal and professional communication, but it's definitely an issue now. So I know people that can't use, a Dell computer because they're used to Mac. Trying to switch between a Dvorak versus a QWERTY keyboard, for example, and even pilots have to deal with reversed controls when they're sitting in either the co-pilot or the pilot seat, and laparoscopic surgeons who sometimes have to have mirrored or reversed surgical cameras when they're conducting their procedures. So I study what's called Tetlag. Tetlag sounds a lot like jet lag. And that's because this is the disruption in performance caused by switching from one interface to another. There's a lag. People are sluggish. So the average person, one study shows, has 3.2 different devices and switches between them as many as 21 times per hour. That is incredible. So all of this switching is definitely costly. So we think we're multitasking, but we're not. The reality is we're completing a task and then there's a ramp up when we switch to completing a task on a different interface or a completely different task. There's also a global cost for having both task sets in your head at the same time. So it's costly from a time standpoint and from an execution standpoint. So what about bilingualism and biliteracy? So this is prevalent in every country. Africa has 4 major languages and a lot of individual languages, like Jose was just talking about. The major ones are English, French, Arabic, and Portuguese. In Europe, 60% of people are bilingual, and that's very much encouraged in the European Union. And in the United States, it's about 20%, so a much smaller proportion. So it used to be the case, this is before my time as a cognitive scientist, but it used to be the case that doctors and pediatricians would tell people, do not teach your child a second language if you have one. Do not speak one language at home and one language in the community. The reason is because it would slow children down because they have 2 sets of information or more than 2 that they're trying to learn instead of 1. But the reality is, and my apologies for the typo here, is that we have found that better executive function actually is the result. So yes, it might take children a little bit longer and they might be a little bit slower as they're ramping up, but at the end of the day, when they get older, they can alternate between different tasks and they can inhibit irrelevant information better than people who do not have more than 1 language at their back, and it also protects against dementia. So with the global trend towards bilingualism and biliteracy, we need to consider how interfaces are being designed. Okay, oops, sorry. So what is Tetris? Well, if you've played the video game, that's what I'm talking about. It's literally the most popular video game of all time. It came out in about 1986 and was popularized and commercialized by the Nintendo Corporation in 1989, who released a free version of it with every copy of the console that was sold. It's a falling block puzzle game. So if you look at the background of my slides, these are actual Tetris pieces. And you want to fit game pieces to make solid rows. I'm going to speed up a little bit because I don't want us to get short on time. But basically, you can clear 4 lines at a time, which is a Tetris, and you lose when the pile is top. It's a great experimental paradigm. And the reason I say that is because it's very similar to chess. When people think of Tetris, they think of the little bit that they've seen or that they know. But the reality is, I have studied people who started playing when they were children, when Nintendo released the first version for free and you didn't have to ask your mom for money to buy the game, when they were in 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade. These gentlemen are now close to 40, and because it's not like sports, it's a brain game, they are at peak performance and they can actually execute the game and make decisions within 1/3 of a second, which is incredible. So I spent a lot of time studying the entire range. And so just like chess, which is very much studied in cognitive scientists because we want to see how learning curves progress and develop, Tetris is a fantastic experimental paradigm. Now young people are starting to get into it, people that the game existed way before they were born, and they are doing things that even some of the guys in their 30s and 40s that have been playing for 20, 30 years cannot do. So you can play for 30 years and still never master the game. So I have a version of Tetris that I use in the laboratory. It's called Meta-T, and it's basically developed to mimic the original Nintendo version. I'm not going to get into the details, but I collect over 100 different features in the structure of the task board and how people are actually executing the pieces. So this is down to the millisecond level for every single game piece. We call that an episode that falls. I collect all of these detailed measurements in the version of Tetris that I have. It looks just like regular Tetris. They even use a regular controller, so they think they're playing the original version of the game. Although we did find out when we used our experts on this game that there are even smaller, like as small as 1/10 of a second, they can notice differences in the game between our version and the regular version. So these guys are really at the top of their game. And there's also a number of motor features that we collect data on. So we basically know every single player behavior down to the millisecond level. So here's just an example of some of the features. So this would be a Tetris board right here. And if I were to look at the top height, it's a total of 20 is the length of the game board. This green line here is the maximum height. That would be a value of 12, because this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 units up. Jaggedness, this would be the purple line. That's how up and down the pile is, so it's very ragged. Pits, these are these covered holes, so you have to clear lines in order to get in and actually make progress with the game and to score points. And mean height, that's the average height of all of the columns. I also look at initial latency, so this is just a handful of the 100 or so features that we look at. How long before they interact with the piece when it initially spawns at the top, how long do they spend manipulating the piece, and then how long before they hard drop, and that's basically they've decided where the Zoid is going to be placed, and they actually press the hard drop key. And one feature that I particularly like is called matches. Matches is we have this piece right here. Each piece has approximately 10 sides, so this is a line piece right here. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you put that piece here, You match on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sides. If you put it here, you would match on 3 matched edges. And if you put it here, you would match on 1 matched edge. So we're really looking at how well people can play the game, and we want them to know it. So that's the beauty of using Tetris as an experimental paradigm, because almost every single person on the planet has at least seen it, and a lot of people are really, really good at it. So I use Invertris to study Tetlag. So Invertris is basically the same game, but I've remapped the controller and the game pieces fall up. So gravity is now inverted. Also, learning and memories are consolidated with sleep. So I have people play the upside down version and then sleep in between the different sessions. And I need at least 2 days between the sessions. My subjects are American University and Cairo students. These are native Arabic speakers. They begin speaking English in kindergarten, and all of their classes and coursework is in English. So basically, I bring them into the laboratory, I conduct a language survey, and I assess how well they can actually read Arabic script. I give them an initial session of Tetris where I assess their skill and give them some reminder of what the game is like. And then I spend 3 sessions. So every subject takes 2 weeks. It's going to take a while. And then in the very last session, I have them play the inverted version for 40 minutes. And for the last third of the session, they switch back to regular Tetris. So that's just a Tetris right here, not Invertris. It's back. Look at Tetlag, which is when they switch back to the regular version, how messed up are they? So why do I care about Arabic English bilinguals? Well, reading and writing fluently in text presented in different directions. For example, hello, my name is Jackie in English would look something like this in modern standard Arabic. We have a whole host of evidence that all sorts of languages that are bidirectional. So Hebrew's also right to left. Chinese is top to bottom. Japanese is top to bottom and right to left. We have a whole host of evidence that there's all sorts of non-linguistic behaviors that are affected just by the cultural habits of how you read. So children, if they're given a line of toys to explore, the Arabic children will start with the toy on the right and proceed to the left. The English children will start with the toy on the left and proceed to the right, and so on and so forth. There's loads of data on how just the cultural reading habits. So I proposed kind of a cross-domain theory that this is going to affect how people switch between interfaces. So this is getting back to all of this switching, right? If you switch between different versions of text constantly all day in your life, just like my students at the American University in Cairo, because they talk to me and they write all of their papers in English, which is left to right. But then when they talk to their friends or they send text messages or read signs or whatever else they do when they're not taking classes, they're going back to right to left text. So my argument is, if you are practiced at switching between different versions of text that go different orientations, then you could probably have better Tetlag or not as bad Tetlag. So what did I find out? Well, so I just have to give you an overview of 2 types of phenomena, and I'm going quickly through this. I can't get into all of the details, but basically there's something called positive transfer, which is facilitation, and that's when prior learning of information helps learning new information. So that can happen. Learning how to do one thing can help you learn how to do another. Negative transfer is when this prior learning actually hurts learning new information. So, oh my God, I've got this old way of doing things in my head. I can't switch to a new way. Retroactive transfer is if you have an old way, you learn a new way, but then you have to switch back to the old way. That new way that you had in the middle kind of gets in the way. And then Tetlag is I switch back and forth between these 2 all of the time. I have to. I switch back and forth between my tablet and my mobile phone, or between my Mac and my Windows. And you already know how to do both interfaces, but you're still going to have a brief lag in performance. So just to give a brief version, I can't go into all of it, but basically I had to assess every single player's skill level, and I had to assign them a criterion score, which is the 6th root of the average of the 4 highest scoring games across all of those dimensions. And this was what the curve looked like. And I had to rank them by who were the best and who were the worst subjects. And so in this group, this was the best. I'm not sure why the rankings didn't come through when I copy and pasted this. These are the best subjects. They had the highest crit score. These were the worst subjects. And what we found was that there was facilitation. What we found was that for both types of subjects, English and American English speaking only subjects, they got better, a lot better at the task. And this isn't even all of the episodes. This is just game level data. Score, lines cleared, level reach, numeric, episodes, game duration. It's going to take me a long time to get through all the episodes, but I've got all of the game level data figured out. And what we have found out is that if you look at some of the higher level stuff, for all of subjects, when they first came in and played Tetris, they were scoring around 1,500 points. They accomplished about 57 episodes as number of game pieces that fell, and they would clear about 11 or 12 lines. This jumped up to 5,000 points by the time they finished the 2 weeks of sessions. They 83 episodes, and then the lines cleared were 23.6 lines cleared. So as you can see, everyone got a lot better. But how does this break down by language bracket? Well, as you can see, the English-only subjects actually had more facilitation. So no one had Tetlag, which is what I initially expected. Everyone had positive transfer and or facilitation. And the reason for that are for reasons that I can't go into that are beyond the scope of this, but it basically comes down to the similarity between the two tasks and how they are treated mentally. You need tasks that are extremely different in order for their transfer to be like interference, basically. So the two versions of the task are extremely similar, but as you can see, English board in just the game level data. Again, I have to look at the episode level data, the motor features and all that stuff. So as you can see, they did a lot, everyone got better, but the English only subjects got a lot more better than the American subjects. So why is that? So this goes back to the two separate writing systems. My next job is to find two completely different tasks and still push forward and see if American English or American English biliterates are going to have less Tetlag. But because of the two writing systems, they treated two versions of the game separate. Oh, I've got Tetris over here, and I've got the upside down Invertris over here. And these are two separate games that I'm learning in the laboratory over the course of the 2 weeks. Whereas the English only subjects viewed it as the same task. They got better at the task overall. So when they switched to the upside down version, they just viewed that basically as the same task. I had to go back into the history of some of the literature on this, and I found that some work was done on, I believe these were Farsi speaking subjects, and they were children that were either French Farsi or French English. And basically they found that French English bilingual children could help each other. Learning French help you learn English. Okay, the two could support each other. This is that positive transfer. This is that facilitation. Whereas when it was Farsi, which is using Arabic letters, when it was Farsi, the children developed separate different representations because the two language and writing systems were both so different. So they developed a parallel processing system of reading and writing. So my belief is that what happened was when they saw my game, they saw it as two separate games, whereas the English students saw it as the same game and simultaneously got better. I'm not sure why that sentence is not finished, but basically what I was trying to say is that 260 million people in Africa speak Arabic as a second language. It's the second most common language spoken on the African continent. And so obviously this has some important implications in terms of when we are designing interfaces, who are we expecting to get better at what and how? So I am going to end my talk here and ask for people's thoughts, suggestions, and advice, and I don't have time to go into any more detail.